Tuscan orange grapefruit. My God, America is imploding.
I literally started off with a freeze. That was interesting. Guys, hello and welcome back. This is the first episode of Fanzone in 2021. Woo! We're here. The tournament is started already. We are on our way. I'm super excited. We've got a really good match for you. So we've got the number 1 seed, Kirk, is back. He hasn't played in Fanzone yet. He played in Nerdgasm back when that was a thing, and I can't believe I just let that word fall out of my mouth. But that was the last time we saw Kirk. And then we have a debut here today coming in at the number 16 seed, Joe Farrelly. So we haven't seen him play in Fanzone, but I hear that he has debated in other leagues. So this is going to be a very interesting match. So on the desk, judging with me today, it's a family reunion. First off, we have Roberto. Robert, how are you?
I'm doing lovely. I think I might want to change my name to Roberto. I think I can pull it off. There's.
I tried to call you Roberto as a child, and you would yell at me.
You also called me Bobbert as a child, which I would also yell at you for. But that's different. We're not here to settle petty family squabbles. We're here to judge debates. Damn it! And I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. And then Maggie is here. Maggie, are you happy to be here? I think I know the answer.
But... You don't want my honest answer. So yes, I'm happy to be here. It's been a while since I've judged a Fanzone match. Or I don't think I've ever judged a Fanzone match.
No, I think you haven't judged Fanzone, but Nerdgasm was last.
So it'll be good to, hear people talk about things that aren't Fandom. So that's always exciting. I was there when Kirk played Robert, and that was a great match, and I'm excited to see what Joe can do. So yeah.
That is Maggie just hit the nail on the head with it is exciting to hear people not talk about Fandom, which is why we made this how we made it. So guys, let's go and talk to the competitors right now. We're going to first start off with the number 16 seed, Mr. Joe Farrelly. Joe, you are debuting in this league at the number 16 seed. I had someone drop out, and then you messaged me the next day and said, I want to play. And I said, perfect. I got the spot for you. How are you feeling about today's match?
I feel good. It's I like debate. It's so different from the trivia because obviously you have the preparation time, you know what's coming, and it's all about, looking at your choice, looking at the other choice and seeing where it can be torn apart, where someone else can criticize it and figuring out how to come back to that. And I enjoy that. I enjoy having a bit more prep and a little bit more things to work with.
Absolutely. All right, let's go and bring in the number 1 seed. It's Kirk Kowalkowski. Kirk, we haven't seen you since you last played Robert in that number 1 contenders match. So your last match was in a number 1 contenders. You're back, and now you get to talk about things that you actually like.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this match today?
Good. I still want my 15 seconds back talking about Call of Duty with Robert. I think about that at least once a week, and I get mad. Yeah, I'm excited to be back. I'm excited about the new format. I don't know how the number 1 seed earns to be matched with Joe. I know Joe hasn't played here yet, but I've heard of his reputation, and I told people I was playing Joe, and they were like, "Oh no, you're in trouble." So I'm kind of mad whoever dropped out, and I had to play Joe instead. But it should be fun. I always enjoy being here. It's always a good time.
Awesome. I think if I remember correctly, you can blame Doug Castle. That's who you can blame. So you can send Doug a strongly worded letter.
On the list.
So, guys, here's how the show is going to work. Like they have alluded to, they drafted some categories from both the worlds of Fandom and Warzone. We created some questions for them to debate about. They submitted some answers, and they are going to debate those tonight before us. Maggie, Robert, and I will then decide who we think the winner is after each question and write it down on our whiteboards or phones or whatever we decide to use tonight. And the first person to 3 is the winner. So they've been given 4 prep questions. If we are tied after those 4 prep questions 2-2, we will go to a speed round bonus question to decide the winner. So before we get into the big fight, let's watch this fight. The big betrayed me in the title match, but that's okay. We're going to get started right away with question number 1, which was drafted by Mr. Category of directors. And the question is, what is the most accessible Akira Kurosawa film? So, Kirk will get to go first. He will get 1 minute to open his argument when he starts talking. And Kirk, I will come in and give you a 10-second warning when your time is ending.
Okay, we're talking about accessible Kurosawa movies for someone coming in for first time, hasn't watched them before. It may be because, there's two. It's a foreign film. It's a international film. It's a black and white film, foreign language to a lot of people. So what are we looking for? What do we need? We need to break down the language barrier. We need something people can connect to. So the movie I picked was Sanjuro. It is a very straightforward action movie. It's almost it could be considered in the Western genre almost. So it's a very accessible, universal genre. It's a very simple story. It's streamlined. So there's not a lot to follow. You don't have to worry so much about following every line of dialogue with the language. So that makes it a lot easier. So thinking about someone coming in for the first time, trying to get them hooked on Kurosawa because he's made so many great movies. I picked one that is simple, quick, easy, and something that's going to be fun for them to watch. So I went with Sanjuro.
All right. Ending a couple seconds early there. We'll now bring in Joe. Joe, same thing. You have 1 minute to open your argument, and I'll come in with 10 seconds left to warn you.
When we're talking about accessibility of a movie, we want to make it accessible for everyone. And you're introducing someone to a director that they've never seen before. But with Kurosawa, you have to remember these are movies that are a little older. And unfortunately, when it comes to foreign language films, there are several other factors you need to consider. Is it a good movie? Is it still relevant? Will it inspire them to carry on with the filmography? And that's why I chose Rashomon. At its heart, this film is an exploration of the human compulsion for lying and the meaning of what truth is. And I think in 2021, that is definitely a theme that we can all agree that is relevant. I think Rashomon is a perfect movie to introduce someone to Kurosawa, because when you're introducing someone to Kurosawa, it needs to be accessible. And by being accessible, it is relevant. Its themes still carry on. But when you are introducing someone to Kurosawa, you have to remember that this is Kurosawa, and they are going to be watching Kurosawa once they've watched this one. So it has to be one that they can watch and want to watch more.
Time. All right, guys. You now have 5 minutes to free-form debate.
Before we start, I just want to ask a specific word of the question. It was most accessible for someone who's never seen Kurosawa before, right?
Yeah.
That was the exact word of the question?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to clarify that before we start.
Yep. So 5 minutes free-form. Don't talk over each other. Try to have a nice even back and forth. If one of you starts filibustering, I'll come in and tell you to shush. But otherwise, yeah, let's do it.
I think the main problem I have with Rashomon is it's a good movie. They're Kurosawa, they're all great movies, but it is still a little art house. And thinking someone coming in at entry level, I think there is a little bit of a it's the story. I mean, you're back and forth. You have a lot of storylines going on with a lot of different characters, and I think that's the biggest drawback to bring in some of Rashomon. To me, Rashomon is the maybe second, third, fourth Kurosawa movie they watch after they've just got accustomed to that world he builds. Then you get them something a little more off the rails like Rashomon and take them to a different place. That's why it was something that was a little more just baseline to start them off with.
I understand that, but I also think with Sanjuro, I think the issue you have with Sanjuro is if you actually look at the story of Sanjuro itself, it's a samurai. It's a samurai movie, but it's about him coming to help a group of villagers who are hopelessly outnumbered. Now, that sounds roughly familiar to another Kurosawa film, a better Kurosawa film, Seven Samurai. And I think if you're going to introduce someone with that sort of story, then you go with Seven Samurai. The reason I've chosen Rashomon is because it is accessible for everyone because of its themes, because of its story. The fact that it's about the characters, it's about people seeing themselves as the hero of their own story and what different versions of the truth are. I think that is something that is relevant for everyone. And I think the issue with Sanjuro, not only that, although not directly, it is a pseudo sequel to Yojimbo. And if you're going to start with something. You don't start with a sequel, pseudo or not.
Well, I mean, I'll comment to that. It is a sequel in spiritual sequel. There is no connective tissue between the character or the story. Character just gives the same name, and that's the only way you even know it's a sequel. Otherwise, there's no connection. You could watch one before the other; it doesn't even matter. And then you're talking about themes and things like that. Themes, story, relevance. When someone's coming in, I'm thinking of I'm thinking about the people that I would want to introduce to Kurosawa, and those people a lot of times aren't the kind of people who are worried about themes and like deep themes stuff. They just want to watch a good movie. And B, if they are concerned about that stuff, there's still that language barrier where you got to follow along and try to keep up with all that. With a movie like mine, like I said, it's a universal genre. It's just an action movie. It's very much just these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. We're gonna fight. There's awesome fight scenes, awesome action scenes. And you can get them in, and then you kind of they're just dipping their toe in the water into that kind of movie, that kind of theatrical experience. Then you move them on to a more complicated movie. The reason I didn't do Seven Samurai, that movie's like 3.5 hours long. So I got something a little more compact, something like that. So okay, now you move on to this. Next we do Seven Samurai, then we'll do Rashomon. Here's something really, really fun, kind of off the wall. But now that you're getting into it, let's watch Rashomon. But I feel like Sanjuro is that great jumping off point.
But I think if you look across the internet, and I know you can't always rely on these things, however, you look across the internet, you look at Rashomon, it currently sits on average around 4th in the list of Kurosawa movies that you should start with. Sanjuro very rarely makes those lists, but the thing is, that's what Rashomon is, timeless, because its story still resonates. It still resonates now. With Sanjuro, you have that problem of it rarely making that list, and therefore it's not as recognizable. So if people who are familiar with Kurosawa aren't recognizing it as something that's top of Kurosawa's work, is it really going to be the sort of film that is accessible to everyone if people who know Kurosawa don't see it that way?
I think the problem with lists like that is you're asking the question to people who already know Kurosawa, love Kurosawa, very familiar with it, and they're going to put the movies they most want people to watch. And that's an easy trap to fall into. It's like, oh, I love this movie, watch it. But you bring somebody in fresh, it's like, what is this? Sanjuro is probably lower on the list because it's not, again, we're not talking about best movie, we're talking about most accessible. It's not going to be at the top of everybody's favorite Kurosawa list for people who love Kurosawa, but it is going to be a movie where people coming in fresh, there's cool sword fights, there's a lot of fun. One other thing I want to talk about too is, because I don't want to bring up the ending, my movie both our movies have Toshiro Mifune. Mine has him, the difference is mine has him as the hero. And I think that's what's so great about Kurosawa. When he's in the lead, when he's the hero, he's so magnetic and so charming that he breaks that language barrier. He's one of the few people, I think, who you can listen to speaking a different language and still just feel what he's expressing. I think he does that much better as a hero than he does as a villain.
Well, that might be good if you're introducing someone to Toshiro Mifune rather than Akira Kurosawa. The thing with Rashomon was the 12th feature-length film released, directed by Akira Kurosawa. And I think with that, that's why you use it as the introduction, because he's not quite perfecting his craft, but he's done it enough times that you can see the bones of his craft, the way he focuses on character and focuses on story, And like I said, with Kurosawa, you're focusing on his intention. His intention was to have Sanjuro as a sequel, and it's Kurosawa's intention. That's why we should follow it.
Okay. Joe, you get to close first. 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
The reason, again, I chose Rashomon is because, it is Kurosawa showing his craft, but it's not the best of his craft. You introduce it with Rashomon, it's accessible because of the story, but when you introduce something like that, it inspires people to go on and watch films like The Hidden Fortress and watch Seven Samurai, watch these great movies, because you've already seen how good he can be, and you know he's going to get better. With Sanjuro, it is 50-50. Like Kirk already said, you're thinking about the kind of people that you're introducing it to, and they're not the sort of people. But the thing with Rashomon is, because its story is timeless, because it focuses on the human nature and human characters, that's why you show that, because it's accessible to everyone. And he's already said in his own argument that he's thinking about certain types of people that he would be introducing that movie to. Rashomon is still relevant now, whereas Sanjuro, it's not being as well recognized, and that's why that's why it's the most accessible film for someone to watch who's never seen Akira Kurosawa before.
All right, Kirk, you now have 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to how are we going to introduce people. I want to get people to Seven Samurai. I want to get people to Rashomon, but I don't want them to be one and done. I'm like Joe said, I am thinking about specific people, the types of people that I want to bring in and introduce to Kurosawa movies. I know if I bring a lot of these people, I bring them in and I show them Rashomon the first time, they're going to be out. A lot of weird stuff going on, a lot of stuff to follow. They don't like subtitles. It's going to be hard for them to stick with that. Sanjuro is straightforward, great leading man, great characters. It has that universal, it's about the characters like all Kurosawa movies are, but on a more basic level that you can go into. Again, sequel in name only, completely freestanding story. Joe talks about perfecting the craft, and very minute details. We're all film lovers here. Of course, we're looking for that. Someone coming the first time isn't going to know that. This is how we teach them. We let them learn. It's baby steps. You start with a smaller movie, and you say, "Yeah, you like that? Look how much better it gets." So let's start them out the basics so they stick with it and want to stick with it.
All right. Bring in the judges. Do we all have our answers? Or do we need memento? Okay, I will start. I'm going with Kirk. I think Kirk did a really good job of painting the picture for me of I think the type of person that he was talking about, that thing about the type of people was exactly what we were kind of looking for in the question. And I think he's right of like showing like it's a very streamlined movie because I haven't seen either of these. The only one I've seen is Seven Samurai. So the one that is very streamlined, he painted a good picture of what the movie is and why it would affect the people that would be watching it for the first time. And I think he did a good job of counteracting Joe's argument of why Joe thought his would be good for first time. So I'm going with Kirk. Maggie, we'll go to you next. Where are you leaning and why?
So I also said Kirk pretty much for all of those reasons that you said. The term like accessible, I understand where Joe is coming from with the themes and stuff, but I think that Kirk was more able to really explain why a general moviegoer that's first watching Kurosawa would watch this movie instead, and then go on. Joe really was focused on like inspiring people to watch more, and I think that Kirk answered the question better.
Okay, so Robert, your vote doesn't count, but we are talking about themes. Where were you going? Okay.
I also would have said Kirk. I did like the themes argument. As far as, relevance, maybe the most relevant movie by today's standards that everybody should go watch or like learn from. I liked that argument, but I agree with everything both of you had said, I think. As far as introducing somebody and wanting, not turning them off, break down the language barrier, that's a huge point for a lot of people as far as the word accessibility, and I just didn't think there was a point for Joe's argument or against Kirk's as strong as that. So
all right, so with that, Kirk,
now the round's over, I'd have given my point to Kirk as well. That was good, man. That was good stuff.
All right, guys. So Kirk gets the first point. We're going to move on to question number 2, which is a category that Joe drafted. This is the category also in Warzone of comedy, specifically the Cornetto trilogy. And the question is, who is the best character in the Cornetto trilogy? So Joe gets to start this one off. Joe, you have 1 minute to open your argument when you start talking.
I think there's always a tendency when people are arguing about the best of something to allow personal biases to take precedent. For example, my favorite Star Wars movie is Return of the Jedi, but I would always argue that Empire Strikes Back is the best. And I think the same applies here. My favorite Cornetto trilogy character is Nicholas Angel, but there's no question in my mind that Gary King from The World's End is the best. He's definitely the most developed, the most well-rounded in the entire trilogy. When we first meet him, he's recounting the tale of the first Golden Mile pub crawl. He's portrayed as this lovable scamp, the rebel, the scoundrel. And the audience is drawn to him, despite some of the more douchey traits. But as the film progresses, however, you see more and more that he's stuck in the state of arrested development. And he's constantly trying to live this last great moment he had with his friends. And despite his friends having grown up and moved on, he just has the most developed arc. He has the most character, and he has the most interesting story. He's definitely the deepest character within that trilogy.
Time. All right. Kirk, we now go to you. 1 minute when you start talking.
All right, when you ask this question, you know it's going to be the choices are going to be characters played by Simon Pegg because they're always the best characters. And I went with Shaun from Shaun of the Dead. I think Shaun is the best character in the sense of the most entertaining, and also the best character in the sense of the best person within his movie and within his story. I think he has the best arc. I just love the arc from beginning to where he is, where he finishes, and everything he accomplishes along the way. I think he just has the he lifts the supporting cast around him, the supporting characters around him the best. I just think he has the best story, and who he is to that movie and what he is and what he becomes, I think is the strongest of the three main characters in the trilogy. So I'm going with Shaun. I'll concede the rest of my time.
All right. Conceding about 15 seconds there. I love cutting out so much. It's probably my favorite thing I do. Guys, you now have 5 minutes of freeform. Shaun versus Gary. 5 minutes.
I think the issue I have with Shaun, who he's a fun character and he is perfectly written for the movie he's in, is that the character really lacks any real depth. He is a bit of a fuck up and a loser, and the architect of his own downfall. He really doesn't undergo any real development. I know he has the moment with his mum in the pub, but Gary has the moment in the World's End pub when Andy pulls down his sleeves and you see the cuts on his wrist because it's so subtle, and when you see it, it doesn't really come as a surprise because you actually realize that everything this character has done throughout the movie has been because he's depressed. And I think that's the deepest moment that any character has. But also he has that moment when he pretends his mum's dead. And you think that's just a sort of a laugh-off moment. But as you get to that scene, it adds weight to that scene because you realize exactly why he's doing the things he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about what they accomplish and where they end up, I think if you look at Shaun, I think Shaun has much more change than Gary does. I mean, you look at Shaun at the beginning, he's self-focused, he's self-centered, he's lazy, he doesn't really care about what's going on with his life. At the end, he's turned all that around, and he still has his friend. He still has that connection to his old life. He hasn't given that up, that part of himself up yet, but he still made his life better. You look at Gary. I mean, at the beginning, he's getting his friends to get together to get drunk. At the end, we see him getting his friends together to get drunk. There's not a lot of development there. I mean, he's still that same guy, and he's kind of, I mean, he is a sad character in the sense that it's sad, but just kind of like pathetic. Like, it's just, that's his whole thing, is like, I just want to go party. He's mean. He's cruel to his friends. He's unlikable. He's just not a likable character, and you learn why, but still, it's not somebody throughout the course of the movie I want to root for. Shaun very quickly becomes a guy I want to root for on his side, and as soon as the crap hits the fan with him, he's there. He's watching out for people. He's taking care of people, where Gary is just completely self-focused the entire time.
I think a fun and likable character is a good thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are the best. For me, a best character is someone who is well-written and has development and has a little bit more depth to them. And I think, you talk about Shaun's development, but at the start of the movie, he's sitting playing video games with his friend. And at the end of the movie, he's sitting playing video games with his friend. All right, he's got a stronger relationship with Liz, and he had that moment with his mum. But where Shaun of the Dead really shines is how the characters exist within the story. But The World's End, it draws strengths from its characters, and it shines where the plot takes a backseat and where the character interactions, has those big character moments within the movie itself. His reveal is the most hard-hitting more than any of them because of his, and it's more poignant because of the journey that actually got us there. You see him as this douche guy who's bringing people in just to get drunk, but by the end of the movie, you realize exactly what it's because it says it because it's all he's got, and that's quite a deep moment. And Shaun doesn't have any of those moments.
Oh, I disagree. I mean, you have the moment with his stepfather, you have the moment with his mom. You see him really having to face, it's all about him avoiding Farrelly. I mean, the point of the Shaun of the Dead is Shaun is the zombie, and it's about him coming back to life. And you see him being forced into situations where he has to live, he has to face life, the ugliness of it and the goodness of it. And that's his character growth. I think that movie, I disagree where, that movie's all about plot. I think it rides very much on Shaun's shoulders, and it's his journey. It's his hero's journey, of development, of becoming that guy. Yeah, at the end, he is with his friend. He's still playing video games. He hasn't let that part of himself die. He still has that connection to his past. But the difference is now he has a future, where at the beginning he didn't. Now he has other things in his life, but he can still, he has a balance of his life of things that's for him and things he enjoys, but also other people. He's thinking about other people and taking care of other people.
But I think with Gary King, I think you have to actually look at the sort of the subtext of the film itself. This is a guy that's suffered through this depression because he can't recapture his lost youth. And despite how much he tries, it literally takes the end of the world for him to actually be able to reconnect to that. And it's supposed to be about that message, is that it's not the end of the world if you can't recapture your youth. And I think that's the point. It is definitely that it's the most mature and it's the most grown up, and that's why he's the best character, because he has the most depth, he has the most development, and it's the message surrounding that character and what that character represents that actually brings that out. And that's why he's the best character, because at the trilogy as itself, although it's not a directly linked trilogy, the trilogy is thematic, and it's young, it's the trying to be mature, and then it's trying to recapture your youth and realizing it's not the end of the world when that happens.
I know I keep harping on the end of the movie, but we're talking about how it's not the end of the world if you can't recapture your youth. But at the end of the movie, it's the end of the world, and he's still trying to recapture his youth. That's still his thing. He still can't get past that. Sean gets past his thing. Like I said, he keeps that other part of himself. He finds balance, but he moves on. Gary doesn't move on. Gary's still that same guy at the end of the movie.
Time.
That's the message of the movie.
All right. So, Kirk, you will get 1 minute to close your argument whenever you start talking.
I think Sean is more naturally the everyman. I think he's more naturally the guy you want to root for. Again, I think he has that arc of going from, living death to being alive, realizing there's a whole big world around him that he can live and that he needs to interact with, and people he needs to take care of beyond himself in his own little sad world. Gary doesn't get out of that, even that takes the end of the world. Sean has, he realizes the moments with his, his mom. He has to say goodbye to his mom when he realizes the connection he had with his stepfather. I mean, those are some devastating scenes. I think those are the most poignant and emotional scenes in the entire trilogy. He realizes his relationship with his girlfriend, how that important it is, and what he has to do. He becomes a human, and at the end of the movie, he's lived that. Gary, I don't root for Gary. I feel bad for Gary. I feel worse for his friends. He treats his friends horribly. He's not a guy you want to root for. Even like I said, he has a sad story, but you're not on his side. You may pity him, but he's not somebody that you connect to.
Time. All right, Joe, you now have 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
The thing is, this isn't an argument about who is the most likable character. It's who's the best character, and that's why I chose Gary Riley, because Gary King over Sean Riley, because Gary has that development, he has that arc. It's easy to stay the same, and I think that's the point. You see Shaun of the Dead, and it's about, when you're young, you can have fun, and you start to grow up. Hot Fuzz, it's about being mature, maybe a little bit too mature, but when you get to the world's end, it is about when you're older and you're trying to recapture your youth. And like I said, it takes the end of the world for him to recapture his youth, and that's the message of the movie, is that if you can't recapture your youth, it's not the end of the world. And like the rest of the characters in that movie, you have to move on. And Gary King is the vehicle to get us there. He has those deep moments. He has the moments where you see that he's got the bandages on his wrist. You see, and that informs the rest of the character's choices throughout the movie, why he is doing what he's doing, why he pretended his mum was dead to his friends. He may be treating his friends badly, but at the end of the movie, when you see the motivations behind that, that's what gives you. It's a moment of realization. It's the final piece of the puzzle.
Time. Alrighty. Oh boy. That was a good fight. Good back and forth, guys. I don't have to yell at you guys. I like it. Robert, your vote didn't count last time, so we're gonna start with you whenever you're ready.
Yeah, there's an ad playing on my whiteboard app, so I'm okay. There we go. I'm good now. We're good. You guys good?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I went with Joe on this one. I think that it was really, really even most of the time. Most of the middle fight was just like, oh, your character doesn't change, mine does. Your character doesn't change, mine does. And it was very, very just the same argument on both sides until I thought so it was all up in the air until the closings, and I thought Joe's closing was just much stronger. I think he counteracted as much as he needed to against any of Kirk's new points and wrapped his argument and summed it up very, very well. So.
Okay, I'll go next. I actually went with Kirk, so Maggie gets to break the tie here.
No.
I went with Kirk. I think because to me, what Robert was talking about, like your character doesn't do anything, the mind changes thing. I actually I took a lot of weight in that, and I thought Kirk did a really great job of being like, well, my character does change, and the change is actually better for the character than your changes for yours, ergo mine's the best character. And I thought that just his overall argument about like every time Joe threw something at him about like, well, he doesn't have any like dark moments. Well, yes, he does. He has this moment and this moment. Like that to me carried a lot of weight. So I went with Kirk. Maggie, you get to break the tie.
I hate doing this. All right. I also went with Kirk. So also sort of for the things that Tim said, where I think his defense was really good. Because I think the characters are very similar, and what they were saying about them was very similar, what they do in their movies. I just think that Kirk had a better defense there. Plus, I think Joe got a little bit lost talking about the movie and less about the character. And that's why I went with Kirk.
Okay. So Kirk is up 2-0. We're going into the third question, which is one that was drafted by Mr. Kirk. But believe me, I know it from my own experience. This is something both of these gentlemen are very strong in. So I'm very excited about this fight. And this is in the category of Star Trek, specifically the original series of films and what we got for them. The question is, who is the worst original series villain? The worst villain in an original series movie. Kirk gets to start this one out. Kirk, you have 1 minute to open your argument when you start talking.
Best Star Trek villains, regardless of TV or movies or whatever it is, are the villains that bring something to the story, bring a character, bring something out of the characters, act as a catalyst for exploration, for adventure. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's an inanimate object, but when it works, it always adds to the story. I went with a character who does not do that at all. The most throwaway generic villain in the entire series, I think. I went with Commander Kruge from Star Trek 3, unfortunately played by Christopher Lloyd, is just a very generic villain, does unnecessary the story, unnecessary the plot, is just kind of there to shoot lasers. It's a waste of the actor who plays it. He does not bring out the best of the characters or the story, and makes for a very flat, and it even makes a not great story, maybe even worse. So my pick is Kruge from Star Trek 3.
All right, Joe, you now have 1 minute when you start talking.
I think throughout Star Trek's history, we have been given some truly great villains. We've also been given some pretty bad ones, but none were more disappointing and bad than the God of Shuckery in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Despite the movie's portrayal of Cyborg as the villain for the majority of the movie, the final reveal of the God of Shuckery, the god that Cyborg has been searching for, being the true villain, is first of all obvious, and second of all dull. You know, when you reflect on Star Trek V, it becomes clear that Cyborg is a victim lured there by the God of Shuckery, under the guise of discovering the truth behind one of the greatest secrets in the universe. But all we get is nothing omniscient, nothing all powerful, just a shape-shifting head who, with laser eyes, who can be taken out by a few well-placed phaser blasts. That's why this is such a bad villain. You know, he adds nothing. He's disappointing, he's underwhelming, and he's unforgettable. Or forgettable, I should say. Caught myself there.
All right. You guys now have 5 minutes of freeform when you start talking.
Joe, I think the problem with your pick is you picked the most interesting thing in your movie. The execution wasn't great, but when I watched Star Trek V, the one thing I'm left with is, what does God need with the starship? You know, why was that? You know, you say it's not omniscient, it's not all powerful, it's basically a shyster, and he's tricking people into thinking that it's God. That is an awesome Star Trek villain. And if the whole movie would have been about that, that would have been great. That is a fantastic, very interesting. Cyborg was a terrible villain. And if they would restructure this movie to bring God of Shuckery like in the end of the first act, and make him the one that is trying to take the ship over and manipulating everybody, that would be a great start, a classic Star Trek story. As it is, though, yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's a bad movie. That's not a bad villain. Your villain is
It is a bad villain. But with Kruge, in your opening argument, you said he brings nothing to the story. Well, you might say that about your movie, but the overall arc of those Star Trek movies, he does. That is the entire motivation for Kirk's hate of Klingons in the undiscovered country.
Yeah,
you say he's just there to fire and shoot lasers. The God of Shakari is just there to fire and shoot lasers out of his eyes. You say he doesn't do anything for the character. He is the motivation for Kirk for the remainder of the series. He is why they have to travel back in time. He is why he hates Klingons. That's why the Klingons are after him and are able to save him from this pointless god.
Yeah, he's the reason why our main character is a bigot and a xenophobe for 3 movies. That's not a plus. That's not something we want to see in our main character. That kind of brings the series down. As far as what he does, God of Shakari isn't just there to shoot lasers. That's all he gets to do. I'm sure there's more he could have done, but we didn't get to see it. Kruge does nothing for the story. The story is Genesis Planet is there. Genesis Planet is dying. Spock's alive. We need to get Spock there. It's almost like they wrote the script and finished it and like, okay, we're 20 pages short and Kirk doesn't punch anybody. And someone back there was like, Klingon warrior. And it just, they brought in the most generic character. They waste Christopher Lloyd. Christopher Lloyd does nothing in the movie. They hide him under 20 pounds of makeup and he gives the most like generic villain performance ever. You take him out of that movie, you have David die a different way, and the movie plays out exactly the same way it does. The plot from beginning to end. He's just there to take up space, like I said, to be the big bad that the story itself doesn't need.
But the thing is, Star Trek V takes its time to show Cyborg as this smart, manipulative, and calculating villain who then just turns out to be a victim in the end. So you must assume that the person who is manipulating Cyborg must be even more powerful, must be even greater. It's going to be great to see. It's going to be an amazing showdown. But what you're presented with is not a mastermind, especially compared with Cyborg. God should be at least twice as menacing, twice as powerful, twice as compelling. But you get none of that. The sum of its wrath reduced to a few. Ooh, that's all you get from the villain. It's pathetic. Kruge may be a mildly forgettable villain, but he's in no way the worst. With a villain, you want to know their motivations. You want to know why they can be ruthless. Kruge wants the Genesis device. He kills his gunner for a mistake. David is killed on his orders, where he even says, I don't care which one you kill. At least he has those ruthless moments, those quotable moments. The only quotable moment with regards to God in Star Trek V is, what does God need with a starship? He doesn't even have any quotable lines. The only reason I know that George Murdoch plays him is trivia studying.
Yeah, now you say like Kruge kills one of his own guys because he's mad. He doesn't care. Yeah, the most like generic bad guy stuff possible is what he does. It's like it's filler. It's villain filler. He doesn't do anything original, anything new. He's not a character we care about or come to know. He's just generic Klingon villain. That's it. The God, I mean, we're calling God of Shakari the villain because Cyborg turns out to be his minion, but Cyborg is the villain of that movie. I mean, for 2.5 acts, he's the villain of that movie. He's what we get to see. We don't get to see the God of Shakari in full action. Yeah, he comes in and gets blasted with photon torpedoes. That's going to take out anything. But like I said, he was able to manipulate people from far distances to think he was God, come in as God, and make him worship them. That is compelling. I want to know more about that. Again, the execution was terrible. But if you rewrite that story, the God of Shakari is a great Star Trek villain.
But despite the Star Trek series, the TV series focus on the more exploration factors. The Star Trek movies, look at Wrath of Khan, you look at the Undiscovered Country, and they were a little bit more actiony. So and even since then, they've all had to have a villain. And at the end of it, when you're telling a story, when you're showing that the villain's not the real villain, there's actually someone that's been pulling the strings the whole time, you're thinking, especially with the way Cyborg's presented as this compelling, manipulative mastermind, you want the thing pulling its strings to be at least twice that. And it's just not. Again, you can quote Kruge. You can say, give me Genesis. You remember his memorable ending. I have had enough of you. All you get with the God is a couple of torpedoes and it's done.
All right. Joe, you now have 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
Kruge, while forgettable, is not the worst villain. He's an average villain in an average movie. His motivations are clear. He has a ruthless streak. And he has the memorable moments. The only memorable thing about God is a line that he's mentioned in. He doesn't even get a memorable send-off, like I said. Which is one thing you need in a villain. Khan, Kruge, General Chang, the Borg Queen, Nero. They've all had endings that you can remember. But a Klingon bird of prey turns up out of the thing and shoots it out of the sky. And just everything you've learned about Cyborg, like I said, you need to have the one pulling the strings to be twice as menacing, twice as powerful, twice as compelling. But you don't get that you get no history. You get nothing in his past. You learn nothing about them, and they get blasted away at the end. It's a disappointing villain. It's a disappointing end to a disappointing villain, and it's just unforgettable. And the only real memorable line he has is "Ooh."
All right, Kirk, 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
Joe's right. A lot of the Star Trek movies are a lot more action-oriented, like Wrath of Khan, great villain. Star Trek 6, Chan, he mentioned, great villain. Or Chang, great villain. But this one, you have an action movie with a very generic action movie villain, adds nothing to the story like those other villains did. Joe said that, there's no history. We didn't get to learn anything about the God of Shakari. That is disappointing because I wanted to know so much more about it, and I didn't get to find that out. Execution is terrible. But the idea is fantastic. He'd be a great Star Trek villain. Kruge is generic. Like I said, it wastes Christopher Lloyd. You get nothing of Christopher Lloyd's very unique talents and acting abilities in that role. It could have just been any generic actor, but they waste Christopher Lloyd. And again, it's the whole movie. The God of Shakari is really just our MacGuffin more than anything. He's not really the villain. We have a whole crappy movie with a whole crappy villain in Star Trek 3.
Time. All right. All right. That was Oompa Loompa Doopity Doo. My goodness. This is a good fight. I have my you guys have yours. Okay, Maggie, you had to break the tie, so you get to go first.
Yeah. This was tough because I think you guys both had good points. But I went with Kirk again because I think that he's just better. He was better at coming up with points against Joe's arguments. Like he was able to come up with, he was more convincing with the generic and with the how nothing happens in the movie, like how Crew plays no point in the story and hitting really back hard at Joe, I think, with the fact that, the God isn't even really the villain of the movie. He's just sort of there at the end. And so that sort of took away from Joe's argument for me.
All right, Robert.
I went with Joe. I disagree with some of the things that Maggie said. I think Kirk saying that he's not a villain, well, it was still accepted as an answer, so we have to take the arguments as I don't know. But also, I think Kirk gave a lot of ground by saying that the execution was terrible, and Joe was like, "Yeah, that makes it a bad villain." I think Kirk admitted too much and gave too much ground, and I think Joe really hopped on that. So as far as debate style, I think Joe played that very, very well, and I agree with everything that Joe says. Kruge may have been a rushed and sort of generic villain, but like Joe said, I'll take generic over actively terrible. So I think Joe argued why God is much worse extremely, extremely well.
All right, I get to break it. I have mixed feelings between you two of what you guys were thinking. I ultimately went with Joe, and the reason I did, the big thing against Kirk for me on this one was I get what he was trying to do by saying I wanted to see more, but the execution was terrible, but it made me want to see more. But like Robert said, the question is worst villain. He is the villain in the movie. So that point that Kirk was throwing out, I get what he was going for, but it didn't quite work for me as a judge. And I think Joe did a really good job of just saying yeah, look, Kruge is not very good, but he has clear motivations. He has clear this, clear that. He does this, he does that. And the God doesn't do shit. So that's basically, that's why I went with Joe. So with that, Joe keeps it alive by getting that point. It's now 2-1 in favor of Kirk as we go into the final question of the prep round. If Kirk wins this one, he will win the match. So Joe needs this one to stay alive and go to the next speed round. So we are going to move on. Question 4 is in the category of James Bond. Another one that I know both of these guys are passionate about, so it'll be interesting. And the question is, What one thing could you add to the Daniel Craig Bond films to make them better? So we are going to start with Joe on this one since he drafted it. Joe, you have 1 minute to open your argument when you start talking.
Daniel Craig's Bond films, they are hit and miss. Casino Royale and Skyfall are fantastic. Spectre is okay, and Quantum and Solace isn't great. The issue with Quantum came really from the 2007 writer's strike. The action scenes were written, but nothing else, and the story was made to fit around those action sequences. And while the idea of a criminal organization attempting a coup is more original than Skyfall's Mission Impossible borrow, it lacks the villain to pull it off. And that's why I would add a more menacing, more compelling villain to Quantum of Solace. You look at the villains during Craig's time as Bond, you have Le Chiffre, menacing, cold, calculating, wonderfully performed by Mads Mikkelsen. Silva, a vengeful, fascinating character that Bardem nails. And despite some of the writing around Blofeld, Christoph Waltz is always a delight to watch. But Matthew Almerich's Dominic Green is forgettable, a slimy middleman, which can work when it's a reveal of a big bad later on, but you don't get that. You just don't get that. And I think you need a better villain for Quantum of Solace.
All right. Kirk, you now have 1 minute to open your argument when you start talking.
Okay, Joe's answer is to make Quantum of Solace better. I agree that needs to be a better movie. I think all the following three from Casino Royale need to be better movies. And I decided the way to do that is to keep Vesper Lynn alive instead at the end of Casino Royale. Instead of having her die, have her betray Bond and be the recurring character throughout the story. I don't like a sad Bond. I like a pissed off Bond. I like a Bond out for revenge. I don't like a sad Bond. Quantum of Solace fails not only because he's a villain, but because you have this sad sack Bond running around being all weaky. That's not James Bond. Let's get him up. Let's get him motivated to move on without just this dour story that flows through the rest of the timeline of these movies. I think Vesper being alive invigorates the character, invigorates the rest of the story, invigorates the rest of the plots that are going on around Bond, and brings things to a better close with Quantum of Solace. Or with Spectre.
Time. All right. Guys, this will be interesting. I like this already. 5 minute freeform when one of you start.
So I think mainly the issue with Matthew Almerich's Dominic Green is that he feels more like a henchman than an actual villain. And I think that's where the movie drops down. You look at License to Kill, I think Timothy Dalton as a Bond out for revenge in License to Kill, I think it's a fantastic performance. And I don't think that Vesper being alive necessarily creates that Bond. The only good thing about Quantum of Solace is Bond, and it is the way Daniel Craig plays it, and it's because it's that motivation, it's that revenge, and I think that is probably the best bit of Quantum of Solace because it informs those really well written and performed action sequences, and I think that's where one of the mistakes in that choice comes from.
Well, I would say that keeping her alive, he's still, in License to Kill, he was out revenge for his friend. It wasn't because the woman he loved died, which is a completely different type of revenge, completely different kind of story. I think if Vesper's alive, he's still motivated. He still has that edge to him. He's still angry, but he's being more active. And with her there, he has more to do than just be like revenge. He's out for it. He's finding things out. That makes that entire story of Quantum and Solace a lot more interesting than if it's just revenge and sadness. Also, good.
I think if you look at Casino Royale, I think Casino Royale is the best of Daniel Craig's. It's a fantastically well-written movie, and you have to remember it is the origin story for the reboot of James Bond. His relationship with women has always been, part of the movie since Dr. No, but to give that trait an explanation, to do it in such a way to show that the first true love of Bond's life not only betrayed him, but died because she tried to save him in the end. I think it informs the character for the rest of the movies, and it also informs the character choices that have been made by previous Bonds, despite this being a reboot. I think if she survives, I believe that despite her betrayal, he would have stayed with her, and it shows throughout Quantum of Solace how her death affected him, and what moving on from that means to him as James Bond, and it allows him to have those moments that he has with Camille.
Well, I would say that if she betrays him, if he's betrayed by the first woman he loved and turned against because of that problem, that would inform things the same way. Again, just give it more of an edge of anger and payback more than just sadness and depression. I also think I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second, Joe. Your pick was the better villain, a better villain for Quantum of Solace. Go.
Well, yeah, because if you have to look at Quantum of Solace, you have to look at the way the movie works. And, you have Matthew Ulmerich playing just what is basically a henchman who, all the only final fight is swinging the axe at Bond. And it's poor. And the thing is, you actually have to look at Spectre as well because of how poorly and it is loosely tied together with that reveal of that he was controlling it all. But you don't have that menacing thing. Matthew Ulmerich works well as a henchman, but you have to remember he's working for Quantum, and it has that thing, and that's never paid off. And because that's never paid off, you have to bring it back to Quantum of Solace and have a more interesting and more dynamic, more menacing villain. And going back to the Vesper issue, because of his motivations and his revenge, and because of her loss, it allows him to have those connective moments with Camille. It allows him to connect with her, not just on a, it allows us to connect with her on an emotional level because she lost family and he lost someone that was close to him. It allows to perform those moments. The small moments of good in Quantum of Solace come from Daniel Craig's performance, and it's the performance around those moments.
I'll get back to that, but I want to push you on this show because your answer right now is just a better villain. It just makes the movie better. I want you to tell me what that better villain is. I think to get this point, you have to tell what the better villain is. You just say get a better villain because we all know that. We all know that it's a terrible villain. What's the better villain, though?
Well, the issue, like I said, with Matthew Ulmerich, he is the henchman. He's working for Quantum of Solace, and Mr. White is there in the background. I think you need to show who is pulling the strings. I think you need to show why this organization is the way it is. They loosely tie it off with Blofeld in the end. It's a character like a Blofeld. That's the issue of the movie. If they had a better villain in that, they could have informed it into Spectre towards the end. But because they didn't have the rights to use the Spectre organization, they created Quantum, and they didn't pay it off by bringing it back to Blofeld. And it was just, I was the architect of all your pain. It's just a photo of Matthew Ulmerich in a cell at MI6. It doesn't inform the movie, and that's why you need to have this more menacing villain, the one that's pulling the strings, the Blofeld type that is never revealed. And Matthew Ulmerich is just a puppet, and it doesn't work with the movie. And the Spectre reveal later on.
I completely agree. I completely agree with you. We need a better villain, but you're not giving that better villain. Going on to Spectre,
the Blofeld type. It's the Blofeld type.
Obviously that's always the better Bond villain, but I mean, like, I need more detail. If Vesper's alive, we're talking about Spectre now. When you bring in Spectre, Blofeld is a very clunky villain because he's just out of nowhere. I was pulling the strings. I manipulated everything, and it's just kind of weird. It doesn't really, I'm your brother. It doesn't really connect, but they needed to create that connectivity to the character. If it had been Vesper the whole time involved working with Blofeld because of what she was able to draw from what she knew of Bond, that would have made that story and that character much more intriguing.
All right, time. Thanks for reminding me that they were brothers in that movie. Jesus Christ. Okay, so Kirk, Kirk, you get 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
When Vesper died in a Casino Royale, it just kind of really just set the tone for the entire series, and it wasn't a good tone. It kind of dragged everything down and made the Bond character somebody we really didn't want to see as Bond. If she stays alive, she is a overarching force throughout the rest of those movies. Where is she? What's she doing? Why did she do this? At the end, again, like I said, you connect her to Blofeld, you connect her to Spectre, and she becomes the dots that connect. That really didn't connect that well as the movie stands, as the story stands right now. You bring her in, you replace her with a like the Male and SWAT character. You replace her with Vesper instead, and all of a sudden you have great stakes because you go back. Oh my gosh, it's Vesper. What's Bond going to do? Is Bond going to, stay with her? Is he going to, get revenge for the betrayal? How is he going to handle that? You make the character of Bond deeper. You make the stories more interesting. You give them more stakes, and you just make, again, you not only make Quantum of Solace better, you make all three subsequent movies better.
All right. I would like to point out that Kirk, kind of a Blofeld character with his cat there with him. All right. Joe, you now have 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
As I've already said, Matthew Ulmerich's character is more of a henchman. You need to show that Blofeld type who's pulling the strings. I know they revealed it in Spectre that Blofeld was one behind it, but it's so clunky and it's so poor, and it doesn't really connect with Quantum of Solace because it's Quantum and then it's Spectre, and it doesn't work. And that's why you should have revealed the Blofeld type in Quantum of Solace. I think you have to remember with Vesper's death, it brings Bond back to MI6. He'd sent off the resignation letter just before it was revealed, and I know the betrayal's still there, but we can see how close Bond is with Vesper and how much he loves her. And I do think that he would have stayed with her, and that resignation would have stood if she had survived. That death informs Craig's performance of Bond for the rest of the series. It informs his moments with Camille, those moments of deep connectivity that he has with her, because they both lost someone close to them. I think keeping her in there is poor. It doesn't fit with the Bond style. It doesn't fit with the Bond way of having the different girl each time. You need a better villain in Quantum of Solace, purely for the reason that the villain is poor. It's a henchman, and you need to have someone pulling the strings, a bigger villain, and that poor villain Spectre does not cut it.
All right.
Can you just tell me what the question was again?
The question again. Is Cody here or is it Maggie?
I'm sorry.
Add one thing to the Daniel Craig Bond films to make them better.
Okay.
That's what I have in the document, and then let me pull up exactly what I have that I gave to them.
And there was clarification there too.
There was clarification at one point. Yeah. I'm just pulling it up. So the initial, what one thing could you add to the Craig films to make them better? And then the clarification I made later was one thing you would add or change to make the movies better, whether that's a behind the scenes or actually something in the movie. Implying they could change a director or change out an actor or something like that. Okay, I am ready. You're not ready?
I use not, yeah.
Okay, all right.
You want to vamp for a bit, Tim?
Sure. I haven't had dinner.
What are you going to have, do you think?
I don't know. I got to order something. Probably some fast food type item because I'm a fatty. Because I'm a fatty, but...
Are you feeling like Culver's, like chicken?
I can't get Culver's delivered, unfortunately.
That's a shame.
You ready, Maggie?
Yeah.
I'm going first because I broke the tie last time. I'm going with Kirk. And I froze right at the reveal. I'm going with Kirk because I think he did a better job of answering the question. I think he did a better job of giving me an overall how his change would affect all of the films. And Joe started to get there at the end by explaining the how it would eventually tie back to Blofeld, but the initial first big chunk of Joe's argument until Kirk put him on the spot which by the way, the ball's on him for doing that. Until he put him on the spot, it was just, we just need a better villain. And that didn't work for me. Whereas Kirk gave me exactly what could happen. He painted a beautiful picture for me of what could happen if his change had been made. So I'm going with Kirk. Maggie, you get to go next.
Yeah. I went with Kirk for the same reasons, basically, just with the question. And he had more of an idea of how that would change the movies and how he thinks it would change them for the better. I think that Joe had a good argument about, why the villain in Quantum of Solace was bad, but not necessarily, and how it would make Quantum of Solace better, but not necessarily how it would make the series better. So yeah, that's why I went with that.
Robert, your vote didn't count, but where are you leaning and why?
I would have gone with Joe again. The reason there is, I think that when Kirk put him on the spot, I think he answered well enough. We need to see the big criminal organization. We need to see the Blofeld type, even if it's not Blofeld. And then I think Joe did a very, very good job of saying why that Kirk's change would hurt and hinder the movies, because that influences and it informs Craig's performance and his character for the next 3 movies. Those movies would be different for the worse should Kirk's change be implemented. That's what I really liked about Joe's argument, and I didn't hear anything about why that change wouldn't be a good thing from Kirk about Joe's argument. He put him on the spot, and I think Joe answered well enough, but I didn't hear anything from Kirk about why that change wouldn't help the movies.
All right, well, fair enough, but with that anyway, Kirk is the winner. Your winner is, I guess that's what I normally am supposed to say. Kirk won! Yay! Okay, so Kirk, we'll talk to you first. You won. the number 1 seed, moving on. How are you feeling about the match and how you played?
Really good. I was real nervous coming in. Like I said, I know Joe's got a reputation for being a great debater, and he lived up to it. To be honest, I didn't get the points I thought I was going to get. I thought this would go to the speed round with Joe and I each getting our own points. So I thought I had that Star Trek one in the bag. But that's always the one I lose, is the one I think I'm most likely to win. But no, Joe did great. And Joe's definitely not a 16 seed. He was a great competitor, and I was glad to fight him. But yeah, I'm excited to, like I said, I really love the new format, and I'm excited to move on.
This means now that you are playing the winner of Andrew Barr and Joe Harrison, who you have played before back in Nerdgasm. So how do you feel about that matchup?
That would be fun. I'd like to play Joe would be fun again, but I mean, me and Andrew are always debating on our own anyway. So to do it in an official capacity, I think would be fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll definitely have that match coming up. Move over to Joe. Joe, like Kirk said, definitely not a 16 seed. 3 of the 4 of these were split decisions. A very close match overall. How are you feeling?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. I'm definitely going to blame on the fact that we started at 3 a.m. my time, so we're going to go with that. That's why I couldn't get my words out straight. But yeah, you're right. They were all split decisions except for the first one, which even I would have given the point to Kirk on. So I can't really moan about that. Kirk, fantastic arguments. Did put me on the spot with a couple of them, made me struggle. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. Deserves to win.
So we will have you back for another match later this season when the tournament is over. Is there anybody that is in the league that you just kind of want to yell at and scream at and make them cry?
Absolutely not. I just want to argue my points and be put on the spot like this and just, have a good time.
Sounds good. Awesome.
And sometimes argue about movies I haven't seen.
I was going to ask you that off camera. Okay, so with that, let's go to the judges for final recap. Maggie, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think that they both did really well, especially those last 2 questions were super tough. They both had good back and forth, and it was really hard to pick a winner. But overall, I look forward to Kirk moving on in the tournament and seeing Joe back, because I'm sure that he will come back with some vengeance.
And Robert, how about yourself? Final thoughts?
Yeah, that was very good. There weren't really any questions. Even the first one, there weren't really any that were straight up blowouts. I think all of them were pretty close, pretty even. A couple sentences here and there could have won it for either person. So I think that was a very close and good match, even if it didn't go all the way to the speed round. I think both players have something to walk home proud about.
I would agree. So, guys, that'll do it for us for Fanzone today. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a great match, and like I said, we've got more coming for you. We're actually going to be back next week with Robert is going to be playing in a match. He's going to be playing his good pal RJ. So they're going to be playing each other next week. That's going to be a very exciting match. And that's the number 2 going up against the number 15. After that, we will go back to our bi-weekly schedule where we will be every other week. So you get another one next week, then back to bi-weekly. So guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. We'll see you next time with another match. Bye-bye.
That's my bad. I was sending a tweet.